that's true. Naked Palpatine.
Oh, you pick that one. Fresh out of the clone tank, nude Palpatine is my
Well, that's the first thing I think of when you say Dark Empire Palpatine.
All right, listen, children. At the time that you're listening to this, I'm currently home alone, and it's kind of spooky. So you're gonna be my way of not thinking about that. Um, yes, it's Shrek and Donkey. Leave me alone. Um, I'll never forget this book for a couple of reasons. I'm not gonna talk about anything, but at the time of recording this, it is September, so a lot has gone down, and of 2025, and so it's just been a lot, and Baker Backer's books are not particularly a happy, fun, go lucky time, so it's just been hard to get through this one, but I did it. This is the first book of the Aspect Emperor quadrilogy, is that what you'd call it? Quartet. With the Judging Eye, Book 1, which is a sequel series to the Prince of Nothing series by R. Scott Bakker. And this is about 20 years since the events of that previous trilogy. This book definitely feels a lot more like, I should say in certain aspects, especially the ending, very much felt like Tolkien. Especially that you definitely get like a much darker version of the Mines of Moria, I'd say, in here. Along with Acamian, at some point in this book, meets up with these people called the Skin Eaters, who are basically scalpers who hang out and get Shrank scalps. Shranks being these sort of elves of this universe. Really messed up ones, but elves nonetheless. And then, of course, we have the non-men, which, looking at fan images, they just seem to be the engineers from Prometheus and Alien. But because of the scalping nature, but not just that surface level stuff, the Skin Eaters themselves, the gang that Acamian eventually hangs out with in this book, they are reminiscent to me, and they remind me a lot of the Glanton Gang from Blood Meridian by Cormac McCarthy. Now, there was a reason I read Cormac McCarthy when I did at the end of last year, at the end of 2025. And the reason was because I had heard from R. Scott Bakker himself, not because I texted him, but I'd heard online, that some of his biggest inspirations for these books was Tolkien and Blood Meridian. So I picked it up and I read Blood Meridian and I loved it. But that was a separate thing. You can watch my review on that book. But that was originally why I did that. And I'm so glad I did. But because of reading Blood Meridian, I'm now consistently, you'll be seeing it a lot more often, also reading classical literature or older literature. You know, definitely all of McCarthy's run. I know there's some controversy around him, but I still want to read his books. And then just a lot of other things, like I've been reading Hemingway, and I'll be reading Faulkner at some point, and many others, Pride and Prejudice, all those stuff, that's coming. That's a little tease for the future. But all that started because I read Blood Meridian for the sole purpose of reading this sequel series. You know what I mean? So, like I said, with that gang, they definitely give me similar vibes. So that's definitely what I feel there. And then also another thing this definitely feels like is an even darker, more messed up version of Children of Dune. Because in this series as well, without getting into spoilers, we also have the legacy of Kellis. Kellis becoming the Aspect Emperor at the end of the last series. And here, he's in charge of everything. He has his empire, all to stop the no god, whatever that may imply. But he sired many children with Esmenet. Speaking of Esmenet, before we get into her children, she went from being a prostitute in that first series to now being the Empress, arguably the second most important, powerful person in this setting. And yet, she's still in a prison. Because her kids are absolutely bat crap insane. From the oldest, who is very much like his father, but can't really do any magic, to her youngest, Kalamos, who, I don't know if you guys ever seen that movie with Elijah Wood and Macaulay Culkin, way back in the day. But I think it's called The Good Son. Definitely reminded me of that. But this youngest son is very manipulative of his mother. And he just very much gives off Alia vibes, but to the most nth degree extreme. Like, you thought Alia from Dune was creepy? She at least had the benefit of an excuse of having some version of Baron Harkonnen messing with her. This is all him. I mean, there is something talking to him. We're not exactly sure what that is, but I guess we'll find out as we continue the series. All in all, I enjoy this read. Not more than any of the previous trilogy, though. This very much feels like setup for what is to come. And I think because of that, it kind of is lower back for me. Also, Backer is just an extremely intelligent writer, and I often find myself a bit lost on what's actually happening. If it weren't for a bunch of YouTube videos, I would be completely out of the loop. That being said, if you read the previous trilogy, I do think you should be reading this. But even if you didn't, I think you could enjoy this. But I feel like a lot of this would not hit nearly as hard if you had not read the previous trilogy. So I would not start without reading it. But overall, non-spoiler wise, I mean, this is such an amazing expansion of the world that R. Scott Backer gave us, from the new cults rising up that may cause problems from Kellis, to Akemi himself still trying to expose Kellis, to the interesting new characters we get from Sorwheel, who is this, conquered prince of this other kingdom that Kellis has taken, and his faith to his beliefs, but also the overwhelming power and allure of Kellis himself. What will Sorwheel do to Akemi himself 20 years later? What is that like? To all the children of Esmenet, to Esmenet herself, to Mathenet. What is all going on in this series? You got to read to find out, to the new cults, to the new things going on in this setting. The world of Orwa is only getting vastly more intriguing. That being said, the journey of this book I did not feel was nearly as compelling as the other books. Maybe it's simply my lack of No Near, who, as far as he is a terrible person, he, maybe I just have a thing with these Conan archetypes, even though when I read Conan, I was not particularly a huge fan of him. But when it comes to Nair or Karsa Orlong, of course, I'm vastly interested. But we lack that presence in this book. But even still, there's a lot to love here. I can't say, like, I am enjoying my time in the sense that I'm enjoying learning about this world. But I'm not happy. I am so miserable reading this. This is such, you don't read these to be happy. But overall, I do recommend it. I think this is a worthy successor to what came before, The Darkness That Came Before. And I hope you'll check it out. There's a lot of revelations, things that are teased. What will that mean for the future? Well, if you're a big fan already, then you already know. If not, then you'll be along with me for the journey. Or if you already know, then you're watching to see my reaction to certain things. But that's pretty much it, guys. Thank you all so much for watching. I'm getting to spoilers now. If you don't want that, if you've seen the series before, if you've read the series before, if you don't care about spoilers, or whatever, stick around. Otherwise, now's your go to leave. So, there is a letter that talks about Akemian's blasphemy. We also do with the Shrank. It's 20 years since the Prince of Nothing trilogy, but it's been 11 years since the scalping mission of the Shrank was declared. We have the children of Callus, we have Enisarembor, Calamamas, wherever, the youngest son. We have Empress Esme. We have Samarmus, who is a twin to Calamus, but he unfortunately is a bit. He has special needs, I should say. He didn't come out exactly the same as the other kids, is what I'll drop that as. Mimara, who is the child that Esmenet talked about abandoning, but is now since reacquired. We have Coyotes, Anasarambar, I think the oldest son. We didn't get to see Prius in this book, really. I think he may have had a line or two, or not, maybe not at all. I don't remember. I do remember his name coming up, but Prius is now a king. We get introduced to a new character named Sorwil. So Sethwatha and Akemi. In the last series, we knew that Sethwatha's memories were inside Akemi. He would relive these big apocalyptic moments through the eyes of Sethwatha. But now it has stopped being these bigger moments. It is being more intimate, more personal. We're getting more of the actual life of Sethwatha, which inadvertently does end up helping Akemian near the end of this book because of his intimate memory with Sethwatha. It helps get them out of a bail. Hold on. Alrighty. Sorry about that. I get really spooked. Like I said, it's late at night. I'm going to go to my phone real quick. Alright, don't mind me. When a man possesses the innocence of a child, we call him a fool. When a child possesses the cunning of a man, we call him an abomination. As with love, knowledge has its season. That was one of them. I'm also going to go... Oh, never mind. Next one. Sorry. I started doing this a lot. Well, I thought you might be my father. But I really didn't care that much, I think. Her eyes widen as though turning from the inner to the outer in some invisible swivel. I came to find my teacher. I came to learn the gnosis. There it was. Her reason. There is a progression to all things. Lives, encounters, histories, each trailing their own nameless residue, each burrowing into a black future, groping for the facts that conjure purpose out of the cruelties of mere coincidence, and Akemian had had his fill of it. We also learn about the Swale Compact, which is a witch school. So again, Callus has manipulated a way into this position of power to defeat this no-god and other things. He's manipulated away. He has used everyone as a tool to achieve his ends, which may or may not be a good end. But he's also done some good. You know, making a witch school inherently gives some woman more power and ability than they ever had before. So they can't be discounted. Doesn't help that Callus is a right C word. And then, of course, there's also Esmenet's daughter, Mimara, does not know whether or not Akemian is actually her father or not, but it ultimately doesn't matter. She needs him as a teacher. And as we return to my phone, Thalapia, her oldest daughter, by Callus, bowed in a stiff curtsy as they approached. Perhaps she was the strangest of her children, even more so than in Relatus, but curiously all the more safe for it. Thalopia was a woman with an earthly hollow, where human sentiment should be. Even as an infant, she had never cried, never gurgled with laughter, never reached out to finger the image of her mother's face. Esmenet had once overheard her nursemaids whispering that she would happily starve rather than call out for food. And even now she was thin in the extreme, tall, angular like the god her father, but emaciated to the point where her skin seemed tinted over the woodwork of her bones. The clothes she wore were ridiculously elaborate, despite her godlike intellect. The subtleties of style and fashion utterly eluded her. A gold brocaded gown, fairly armored in black pearls. The entirety of Esme's family is Denuane, so what can she have? What free will can she possibly have? Sure, Esminette is the queen. She has more power than she could have ever dreamed of. She is in charge of nations and peoples. She is only behind Kellis himself. But she's still trapped in a prison, whether it be her husband or her kids themselves. She has no agency still. No, maybe a little bit. We'll continue on. A bunch of phone stuff. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay. So, 5 of these. 1 second. Coyotes had been the first. Born close enough to Moangus that the two had been raised as fraternal twins. She had delivered him in Shammai upon the holy Juthram, where the latter prophets, Inris and Gensis, had ascended to the heavens 2,000 years previous. Coyotes had been so perfect, both in form and in temperament, that the lords of the holy ward wept upon seeing him. So perfect like a pearl, she sometimes thought, taking in the world's shadowy jumble, reflecting only a generic silvery light, so smooth that no fingers could grasp him. Not truly, it had been Coyotes who had taught her that love was a kind of imperfection. How could it be otherwise, when he was perfect and could feel no love? Simply holding him had been a heartbreak. Like Coyotes, she had seemed perfect and flawless, and yet unlike him, she had seemed capable of love. What a joy she had been! But when she was scarce 3 years old, her tutors realized that she possessed the gift of the few. Despite Esminette's threats, despite her entreaties, Kellis sent the girl, still a babe, to Lothai to be raised among the wild witches. There had been bitterness in the decision, and no few thought of heresy and sedition. In losing Serwa, Esminette learned that worship can only survive the loss of love. It possessed room for hatred as well. In Melates, and there was no doubt that he could love, but Esminette had developed instincts for these things, as mothers who bear many children sometimes do. From the very beginning, she had known something was wrong, though she could never name the substance of her misapprehensions, but it became plain to his nurses by his 2nd year. Imrelatus was 3 when he first began speaking the little treacheries that dwelt in the heart of those about him. The entire court walked in terror of him. By the age of 5, he could summon words so honest and injurious that Esmond had been so hard-hearted warriors blanch and reach for their blades. She would never forget the time when, after singing to him in his bed, he had looked up with his 2 nimble faces and said, "Don't hate yourself for hating me, Mommy. Hate yourself for who you are. Hate yourself for who you are?" Spoken in the deluxe tones of child adoration. By the time he was 6, only Kellis could fathom, let alone manage him, and he had not the time for anything more than a cursory relationship. She still shuddered whenever she recalled the rare conversations they shared, father and son. Afterwards, it was as if Imrelatus, who had always walked to the perimeter of sanity, simply tripped and tumbled in the wrong direction. The veil of utter madness was drawn down. How strange it had been to find his life revelation in the small things. He who had wrestled with dying worlds, but then the great ever turned upon the small, he often thought of the many known, the warlike ones, or just the plain obstinate, of their inevitable ability to overlook and to ignore. It was like a kind of willful illiteracy, as if all the moments of unmanly passion and doubt, all the frail details that gave substance to their lives, were simply written in tongue they could understand, and so needed to condemn and belittle. It never occurred to them that to despise the small things was to despise themselves, not to mention the truth. But then that was the tragedy of all posturing. And I'll try to voice act here. But the big, probably my favorite scene from the entire book was this one, personally. Esminette's daughter, Mimari. Everything was going so well. And then it came in. This is the way it works. Akamian heard himself rasp in an utterly ruthless voice. This is the way he sends you. This is the way he rules. From the darkness, in our own souls, if you were to feel it and know it, that would simply mean there was some deeper deception. I don't know what you're talking about. He's always been kind. Did he ever tell you to forgive your mother? What do you mean? Did he ever tell you the shape of your own heart? Did he ever speak salving words? Healing words? Words that helped you see yourself more clearly than you'd ever seen yourself before. Yes, I mean, no one... Yes, please, things were going so... There was a grind to an aspect, an anger that had become reptilian with age. Did you ever find yourself in awe of him? Did something whisper to you? This man is more than a man. And did you feel gratified? Gratified beyond measure. At his merest tenderness. At the bare fact of his attention. Oh, that was after Mara had asked him to train and teach her in the ways that he knows. And he realizes that she is here because of Kellis. And no matter what he does, he's playing into his whims. And that beautiful, beautiful piece of dialogue, that desperation, that madness, but also that revelation, that truth, that emotional hatred pours forth into that. And it's just, it was the moment for me in this book. It is the one that I fell in love with personally. And while I understand his position, what he tells her, because I read the first series, but she didn't. I also understand why Mamara simply sees him as vengeful. And this is how Kellis works. And then this, whether or not Akamian is actually her father or not, is ultimately irrelevant. He is a father figure in her life, but Mamara was a slave. A prostitute slave, which is even worse than her mother, who was just a prostitute. I'm not knocking prostitutes specifically, but I'm just saying in terms of power. If Esmenet had the slightest amount of agency, her daughter had none. She was a slave. So, to get what she wants, which is to be a sorceress, she does it in the one way that she knows how, which is seducing Akamian. And Akamian was just as equally accountable to this. He's been a lonely hermit in the tower for 20 years. He is the quintessential, stereotypical wizard in a tower. But he's still Akamian. Also a little crazy. And he's lonely, and she looks just like Esmenet. So they have sex. You know what I mean? They have sex. Just, I don't even know. I don't even know. But for the rest of the book, it's not really like that. But there's always that undertone because it happened. We also get mentions of the White Luck Warrior, which is important considering that's the next book title. Also, Kelmis, the youngest son of Kellis, is dude, I'm telling you, there's some voice talking in his head. I don't know what that's all about, but But the weirdest thing is the way in which he describes his relationship with his mother, and the weird way he always wants her to be hugging her and touching him, and it is uncomfy, let me tell you. But also, his whole shebang is some of the most interesting parts of this entire book. We also have the Black Pit, Non-Men, and Skin Eaters. We meet Sorrel, the musician, and these are the scalp hunters. But it's interesting we have a non-man in his group. Also a shawl. We heard a lot about that in the last series. And Coyotes and Sorwell have this phenomenal scene where Coyotes talks to Sorwell, and I thought that scene was great. Back in the palace, as I said, I forget his name already, but the twin of Calamus is not all there. And they're up on the balcony or something, and Calamus dares his brother to attempt this trick. Instead, his brother falls to his death. And then later on, Calamus will go and kill somebody and get away with it because nobody suspects him. This kid is a menace, dude. An absolute menace. But then after that, Sorwell meets Zumi, the Zumi, which are they're called black men. So I mean obviously not African American because African American doesn't exist in this setting, but I'm assuming they are just African American. We also meet Prince Zeranga, and he has an interesting dynamic with Sorwell. I'm gonna go back to my phone real quick. And this is what you shall do. You shall heed your empress and your Sharia. You shall put an end to the ignoble sham that is your office. You shall make claim to the truth of your station. You shall make war upon the wickedness within your own temple. So you shall cleanse the filth from your own altar. Somewhere beyond the vaulted ceiling, a cloud engulfed the sun, and everything dimmed save the old woman, writhing upon her reflection. Kellis leaned forward. It seemed all the world leaned with him, that the pillars themselves tilted, hanging above the matriarch, shivering in catastrophic outrage. And you shall hunt this witch you call your mistress, Psathema Nanaferi. You shall put an end to the sacrilege that is your mother supreme. Her face averted, her elbows to the floor. She shook two white-palmed hands out of mourning. No, please. Seracinth! The name crashed through the hall, boomed through its arched recesses. Would you offend me in my own house? Dude is ore farming really hard on an old lady, I just have to say. Kellis is an interesting character. We also meet a character named Eskeles, who is another mandate schoolman who is training Sorwell. And as we return to the phone, Esme seems ever so slightly, and I mean slightly. Oh no, this is something that I was saying. I remember asking a wise man once, whether it was last year or 1,000 years ago, I cannot tell. I asked him, why do men fear the dark? I could tell he thought the question wise, though I felt no wisdom in asking it, because darkness, he told me, is ignorance made visible. And do men despise ignorance? I asked. No, he said, they prize it above all things, but only so long as it remains invisible. But I didn't write this down on my notes as I should have, but on this thing I did say, Esme seems ever so slightly, and I mean slightly, more able to defy Kellis' mind control. Of course, it just requires him to try a little bit harder than he used to get her in line. He sees through her face the way you do, only with far more clarity, and he shapes his voice accordingly. How do you know? Calamos asked angrily, stung by the thought that anyone, even father, could see further than him, further into her. The nearer the great ordeal comes, father said, the more desperate the consult grows, the more likely they will unleash what agents remain. Keep Philippia with you at all times. Aside from my brother, she is the only one who could reliably see their true faces. Calamus smiled at the thought of the skin spies, agents of the apocalypse. He loved hearing the stories about their wicked depredations during the First Holy War, and he had gurgled with delight, watching the black one being flayed carefully so that mother wouldn't see, of course. Somehow he just knew he would be one of the few who could see past their faces just as he could see past his father's voice. If he had found one, he decided he would keep it secret. He would simply watch it, spy on it. He so dearly loved spying. What a game it would make. He wondered who was faster. But yeah, I mean, Esme, her son is dead, and Kellis doesn't really care, and she's able to fight back a little bit. And be like, what do you mean you don't care? It was your kid, right? But before, like it was the first series, he would say all the right words and she would fall hook, line, and sinker. In this series, she's able to argue back a little bit. But as I said, all it takes is a slightly, instead of him just effortlessly doing it, he has to make an effort with Esme to get her in line. But he still always does. It's so sickening. And then we get the Mines of Moria. We get this epic kind of like ends the book where they, and it's sort of Lovecraftian in the sense that you are the greatest fear is fear of the unknown, and as they grow closer to getting a better understanding, a better knowledge of what it is that's going on, as we are getting a glimpse that maybe we're going to have secrets revealed, all hell breaks loose. It is terrifying. It is so good. The atmosphere in this section is exquisite. I'm not even a visual reader. Like, I struggle to actually see things, but I will tell you, I visualized this so well. It was perfect. Everything in the scene, I mean, people have talked about before. I mean, what can I really add? I mean, there's so much here. I mean, I didn't even mention, there's some other things I need to, some of the things I need to mention that I didn't mention yet. Like Mathenet himself. Mathenet was such a big part of the last series and like the mystery of him. And it is interesting how he's barely in this book, but the little we get of him, he feels like history. He feels like established, like he's been here all this time. But then, I slightly mentioned it before, but we have the non-man, right? We have this non-man, who has existed for a long time, has a long memory, a long line. And with him and the stuff that happens then too, there's so much good stuff with him in this book. And I'm excited to see where his character goes in the future. But it was super good. All the way to end with the epilogue where Calamus tries to get Esmet to believe that Mathenet may want to hurt, Esme, or, that he's not on his brother's side. So he's sowing dissent. And it's kind of how the book ends. And of course, our heroes, our characters like Esme's daughter, and Akamian, and some of the scalp hunters make it out of this terrifying place into the snow, and the non-man returns. What's that all about? What's that going to mean? I guess we got to read the next book to find out. But as I said, this book very much feels like a setup, but it has set up such a vastly interesting world from the one we left behind in the previous trilogy. It has got me sufficiently on board, even though I hate this world. It is so bleak, and even if Kellis wins, even if Kellis destroys these evil things, if they truly are that, which they definitely seem to be, at least from the first series with the skin spies and everything, which is another thing that feels like doing a little bit. But is it worth saving if Kellis is going to be the one in charge by the end of it? I don't know. I guess we'll continue reading to find out. But thank you all so much for watching. If you enjoyed this video, give it a thumbs up, sharing episode a ton. Don't forget to subscribe, and I will see you for White Luck Warrior next week. Until then, somebody shoot Kellis in the head. I don't know. Although that might cause even worse things to take place if he does die. Grim dark, man. Don't know how to feel about it. Bye-bye.